the galaxy trembled under the weight of the Tornax dominion. A cold, calculating empire known for its brutal conquests, the Tornax had swept through star systems with terrifying efficiency. Their fleet, a vast and imposing force, left nothing but destruction in its wake, wiping out entire civilizations without mercy. There was no hope for the planets caught in their path, no voice of rebellion loud enough to pierce the suffocating silence that followed the fall of each new world. One by one, systems fell under the Dominion's iron grip, their once thriving cities reduced to smoldering ruins. The aliens had watched in horror as the neighboring planets fell, knowing that their peaceful home, Elia 7, would be next. For centuries, the aliens had lived in isolation, a tranquil species who had no interest in war or conquest. They had developed their society through the sharing of knowledge, art, and cooperation, keeping to their quiet corner of the galaxy. Their greatest strength lay in their understanding of the universe and their ability to live in harmony with the natural world. They had never needed to fight because they had no enemies until now. The news from across the stars was always the same. The Tornax were coming, and no one could stop them. Ava Lennox, a historian who had spent her life documenting the alien way of life, knew this was the end. She had never imagined she would live to see such a day. Her people were not warriors, and the aliens had no military to speak of. Their defense consisted of a handful of old planetary shields and a small contingent of unarmed peacekeepers. It would not be enough. With the Tornax fleet already on the edge of the system, there was little hope that even their best efforts could delay the inevitable. The stars above Elia 7 were already darkening, blocked by the enormous shadow of the approaching warships. As the first wave of Tornax ships began to break through the atmosphere, Ava stood on the balcony of her small apartment, gazing out at the tranquil landscape below. She had always loved the vast fields of Elia 7, the peaceful lakes that shimmered like mirrors, and the tall, graceful trees that reached toward the sky. It had been a life of simple pleasures, of quiet contentment. And now, in a matter of hours, it would all be gone. The alien government had long known the day would come, and now it had arrived. The High Council had issued an evacuation order days earlier, urging the citizens to move underground where they would be safe from the inevitable bombardment. The surface of the planet was about to become a battlefield, and there was no place for the unarmed civilians to hide. While the population retreated to the underground bunkers, the military prepared to make a last stand, even though they knew their chances of survival were slim. The aliens had no desire for war, but they had always believed in standing for their people. Some believed it was the duty of every species to fight for survival, even if the odds were stacked against them. Still, the heart of the alien military was small, and their weapons were no match for the devastating force that was closing in on them. The Tornax fleet, immense and terrifying, had already begun its bombardment, sending shockwaves through the surface of the planet, destroying entire cities in an instant. Ava, despite the overwhelming despair that gripped her people, had not yet given up hope. She had always believed in the power of stories, in the ability of history to live on long after the present had passed. She had spent years documenting the culture of the aliens, their songs, their art, their stories, and she refused to let their existence be erased from the galaxy's memory. As the bombs rained down on the surface, Ava sat at her desk, pen in hand, and began to write. She wrote for the future, for anyone who might one day stumble upon the story of Elia 7. She wrote for her people, who had never known the pain of war, but who would soon be caught in the grip of destruction. Her writing was not just a record of events, but a call to remembrance. She wanted the universe to remember that the aliens had been a peaceful people, that they had lived in harmony with the stars, and that their peaceful existence had been shattered by a ruthless invader. She wrote with urgency, each word an attempt to capture the beauty of a world on the brink of destruction. Meanwhile, the military's final preparations were underway. General Kor, the leader of the alien forces, stood before his officers, trying to rally the troops despite the overwhelming odds. "We may not have the firepower to defeat them, but we have our resolve," he said, his voice steady. "We will stand together, and we will fight for the future of our people. No matter what happens, we will not let them erase us without a fight." But deep down, even Kor knew the truth. The Tornax Empire was relentless, and their might could not be stopped. The general had seen the reports whole fleets of Tornax warships, bristling with weapons of unimaginable power, were descending upon them. His own soldiers were untrained, their weapons barely enough to defend against a small skirmish, let alone an invasion of this scale. The planet's defenses, outdated and obsolete, had no hope of standing against the Tornax. Still, Kor ordered his men to fight, even if it was only to buy time for the civilians to reach the shelters. Every second counted now. He couldn't imagine what would become of his people, but he was determined that the aliens would face their final moments with dignity. Above them, the sky grew darker as the Tornax ships hovered menacingly in orbit. The clouds, once soft and white, had turned to a deep gray, casting an eerie shadow across the planet. It felt as though the end of days had come. Ava, still writing, could hear the distant sounds of explosions in the background. The echoes of a civilization being torn apart. As the hours passed, the sound of approaching bombers filled the air, their engines a deep, unrelenting roar. Ava paused in her writing, looking out the window one last time at the beautiful planet she'd always called home. The light was fading, and she knew that her world was about to be swallowed by darkness. But as she continued to write, there was one thought that kept her going. If this is the end, let it be remembered. The aliens had lived in peace, and now they would die in it. But they would not go quietly into the night. Ava wrote the last words she would ever pen. The aliens, though they fell, will not be forgotten. She closed her journal and made her way to the underground shelters, ready to face whatever came next, hoping that somehow, somewhere, their story would survive. And then, just as all seemed lost, the unexpected happened. A strange distortion in the skies. A distant signal, faint at first, began to pulse through the galaxy. It was a frequency unlike any the aliens had ever heard before, a message that would change the course of history. The Tornax fleet loomed above Alia 7, a terrifying sight for the peaceful planet's inhabitants. The massive ships, each one the size of a mountain, hovered ominously in the sky, their hulls gleaming with cold, metallic brilliance. The ships were armed with vast arrays of energy cannons, capable of eradicating entire cities with a single blast. On board, the Tornax soldiers waited for the signal to strike. Their commander, Grand General Zorak, stood in the command center of his flagship, a ruthless expression on his face. The fall of Alia 7 was not a matter of if, but when. To Zorak, it was just another conquest, another easy victory in the endless expansion of the Tornax dominion. He had seen this happen countless times before. His fleet had crushed countless civilizations with ease. Alia 7, a peaceful, defenseless world, would be no different. From the surface of the planet, the aliens watched in terror as the Tornax fleet descended. There was no escape, no way to fight back. All they could do was wait for the inevitable. The alien military had already prepared for the worst, with most of the civilian population hidden deep in underground shelters. Those who had remained above ground, including Ava Lennox, could only look on helplessly as the sky darkened and the first waves of Tornax ships began to open fire. Explosions lit up the sky, and the ground shook violently with each blast. Buildings crumbled, and fires erupted in every direction. The sound of destruction filled the air. The aliens had always been a peaceful species, and now they were witnessing the nightmare they had feared for so long. Their world was being ripped apart. But just as the Tornex fleet prepared to deliver the final devastating blow, something happened that none of them could have anticipated. A strange, unexplainable disturbance appeared in the fabric of space itself. It wasn't like anything the aliens had seen before. A pulse of energy rippled through the air, causing the very atmosphere around them to shimmer and warp. For a moment, the skies seemed to twist, as if reality itself had been bent out of shape. It wasn't just a visual anomaly, something was happening on a deeper level, something that defied all understanding. The first to notice it were the alien scientists who were monitoring the disturbance from their underground bunkers. They watched in awe as the disturbance grew stronger, expanding outward from the center of the sky. Then came a sound, a signal, an echo through the stars. The frequency was unlike anything they had ever encountered. A strange alien hum that seemed to reverberate through the very core of the planet. It wasn't coming from Elia 7. It was coming from beyond, from somewhere far away. The Tornax, too, felt the disturbance. At first, they dismissed it as a simple glitch in their systems, a fluke in the vastness of space. Grand General Zorak, who had been monitoring the destruction unfolding below, barely paid attention to the odd occurrence. To him, it was nothing more than a minor anomaly, a distraction that would soon fade away. His fleet was already winning. Elia 7 was on the brink of annihilation. There was no room for distractions. But then the signal grew louder, more persistent. It wasn't fading away. It was strengthening. Zorak frowned, his patience beginning to wear thin. His officers began to take note of the signal as well, and soon the entire fleet was aware of its presence. A voice over the fleet's communication system crackled to life, breaking the silence. "This is not a fluke," one of Zorak's commanders said. "There is something out there. Something sending this signal. It's growing." Zorak's eyes narrowed. "Where is it coming from?" he barked. "From beyond the outer rim," the commander replied, scanning his instruments. "It's a deep space signal, but the source is unidentified. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. And it's getting stronger." Zorak's expression darkened. "What does this mean?" Before the commander could respond, the skies above Elia 7 began to shift once again. A massive shape appeared, something that hadn't been there before. The atmosphere seemed to distort around it, and for a moment, it was as if the stars themselves were bending toward this new arrival. The Tornax fleet froze in shock. A series of shapes began to materialize, slowly filling the sky with an overwhelming presence. These were no ordinary ships. They were sleek, elegant, and impossibly advanced, their designs unlike anything the Tornax had ever seen. They seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, glowing with a faint, pulsating light. Grand General Zorak stood at the helm of his flagship, his mouth dry with disbelief. The ships in front of him were unlike anything his people had ever encountered. They were too fast, too powerful, their designs too refined. The moment the new fleet came into view, a shockwave of power reverberated through space. It was not just the presence of the ships that caused this, but the sheer, undeniable force that emanated from them. The Tornax fleet's sensors began to scream with alerts, detecting unknown forms of energy, impossible levels of power emanating from the new arrivals. It wasn't just the number of ships, it was the undeniable fact that this fleet was far more advanced than anything the Tornax could have hoped to wield. Zorak's eyes widened in disbelief as the fleet above Elia 7 took shape, their gleaming hulls reflecting the faint starlight. There were dozens of them, each more advanced and powerful than any Tornax ship. And then the realization struck him. These ships bore markings that were unmistakable. They were the symbol of Earth's mighty armada, a fleet that had been rumored to exist. but one that had never been seen by the Tornax. It had always been just a legend, a myth told in hushed voices. But now it was real, impossible, Zorak muttered under his breath. He had believed the stories of Earth's mighty armada to be nothing more than a distant myth, a tale spun to scare the weaker species of the galaxy. But here they were, standing against his fleet, a force more powerful than anything he had ever encountered. The new fleet's ships moved with an eerie precision, positioning themselves around Elia 7 in an unbreakable formation. Their energy readings were off the charts, the technology they wielded far beyond even the most advanced Tornax weaponry. As the first blast of energy surged from their vessels, Zorak felt his heart race. The battle was no longer in his favor. The first exchange of fire was devastating. Energy beams from Earth's fleet collided with the Tornax ships, causing massive explosions in the sky above Elia 7. The power of the new fleet was undeniable, and the Tornax fleet, once so confident in their victory, was now struggling to stay intact. As Zorak ordered his ships to regroup, his mind raced. He had no idea where these Earth forces had come from. But he knew one thing for certain: this was no longer a simple conquest. This was a battle for survival. The sky above Elia 7 had changed forever. What was once a scene of hopelessness had become a battlefield for the fate of two great powers, and the Elians, though still in the depths of their shelters, felt a new surge of hope. A force they had never known had arrived, and for the first time since the Tornax fleet's arrival, the Elians dared to believe they might survive. The battle in the skies above Elia 7 had shifted in a way no one had expected. The Tornax fleet, once confident in its overwhelming strength, now found itself reeling in the face of an unknown power. Admiral Seraphine Calloway, commanding Earth's mighty armada, was not a stranger to battle. A seasoned veteran with a reputation for decisive and relentless tactics, she stood at the helm of her flagship, her expression focused, her eyes locked on the chaos unfolding before her. The Tornax fleet, huge and menacing just moments ago, was now scrambling in disarray. Earth's ships, sleek and powerful, moved with eerie precision, cutting through the Tornax lines like a hot knife through butter. The difference in technology was staggering. The Tornax commanders, once filled with confidence, were now gripped by disbelief. What was happening? They had never encountered anything like this. Earth's fleet seemed to anticipate every move, responding with overwhelming force at every turn. The Tornax ships, massive and heavily armed, were nothing compared to the efficiency and power of Earth's vessels. Energy beams crackled from the Earth ships, slicing through the armor of the Tornax warships with ease. In moments, the first wave of Tornax ships was disabled, their massive frames disintegrating in spectacular explosions. The air was filled with the roar of destruction, and the sky above Elia 7, once a battlefield of despair, now danced with the light of the Earth fleet's advanced weaponry. Admiral Calloway's voice rang out across her command bridge, calm and assured. "Stay tight. Hold the formation. We're not here for show, we're here to end this." Her crew responded with practiced efficiency. There was no room for error in this battle. The fate of an entire planet depended on their success. The Earth fleet had been preparing for this moment for years, watching from the shadows as the Tornax Dominion spread its tyranny across the galaxy. When the signal from Elia 7 had reached Earth, they had wasted no time in deploying their might. And now, it was clear the Tornax had no idea what they were up against. The Elians, hidden in their underground shelters, could hardly believe what they were witnessing. For days, they had watched helplessly as the Tornax fleet pummeled their world. Their planet, their homes, were being torn apart. Hope had seemed like a distant dream. But now, the skies above were filled with an impossible sight. Strange ships, with sleek designs and glowing energy fields, moved with precision, tearing apart the Tornax fleet. The sounds of battle rang out, but this time they were sounds of victory. The aliens could scarcely believe their eyes. Were they really seeing this? A foreign fleet from Earth had come to their rescue. Ava Lennox, huddled in the deep underground shelter where she had sought refuge, watched the scenes unfold on the monitors with wide eyes. She had spent her life documenting the peaceful existence of the aliens, recording the history of her people. But nothing in her years of research had prepared her for what she was seeing now. The Tornax fleet, unstoppable just hours before, was now being systematically dismantled. Its warships breaking apart one by one, as Earth's ships unleashed their devastating power. Ava's heart raced as she held her breath. It was almost too much to believe. She had written of her people's history, their triumphs, and their tragedies. But this was something beyond history. This was the turning point, the impossible rescue that could save them. It was as if the universe had finally answered their prayers. The destruction that had rained down upon Elia 7 moments ago now felt distant, as if the storm had passed and the dawn was breaking. The Tornax commanders, in their ships, were scrambling to regroup. The sheer scale of the Earth fleet was overwhelming. Earth's armada wasn't just large, it was a force of unimaginable strength and coordination. The Tornax, despite their superior numbers, were finding themselves outclassed at every turn. Zorak, the Grand General of the Tornax Dominion, barked orders, his voice rising in frustration as his fleet continued to falter. Regroup. Form defensive lines. We cannot. His words were cut short by the blinding light of an energy blast that tore through the flagship's hull, shaking the entire ship. The battle had turned in favor of Earth, and Zorak knew it. His fleet, once the terror of the galaxy, was being obliterated piece by piece. Back on Elia 7, the aliens began to stir in their shelters. The initial shock of watching their world burn was starting to fade, replaced by a tentative feeling of hope. Could they actually survive this? Could Earth's mighty ships truly stop the Tornax? Ava felt a strange emotion bubbling within her chest. It was a mix of awe and disbelief. She had spent her life studying history, recording the rise and fall of civilizations. But now she was living through a story far greater than anything she had ever written. The people of Elia 7, who had once lived in peaceful obscurity, now stood on the brink of survival. Thanks to this unexpected arrival, the ground beneath the shelters trembled as another barrage of energy blasts illuminated the sky. Ava watched the screens as the Earth ships continued their assault, moving with surgical precision. Every shot fired seemed to hit its mark. It was a beautiful display of power, but it was also a devastating reminder of the destructive force that the Tornax had unleashed on her planet. Yet now it felt as though the tides were finally turning. In the skies above, Admiral Calloway surveyed the battlefield with a calm, calculating eye. She had fought in countless battles, but this one felt different. This was not just a battle for Elia 7. This was a battle for the future of the galaxy. The Tornax had thought they could steamroll over another helpless world, but they had underestimated the resolve of Earth. Admiral Calloway knew that the fight wasn't over yet, but she also knew that victory was within their grasp. The Tornax were strong, yes, but they had never faced an opponent like Earth's mighty armada. With every explosion that lit up the sky, Ava felt her hope grow. Her people had lived in peace for centuries, and now, in their darkest hour, they were being given a second chance. Elia 7 might still stand, after all. There was still a future for the aliens. She held her breath, waiting for the final blow to land, for the last remnants of the Tornax fleet to be wiped out. The battle was not over, but the victory was already starting to feel inevitable. As the ships above continued their assault, Ava whispered to herself, We might just make it. We might just survive this. The battle in space raged on, Earth's mighty armada tearing through the Tornax fleet with a relentless, almost surgical precision. But on the ground, the fight for Elia 7 had just begun. The Tornax soldiers, fierce and well-trained in brutal tactics, descended upon the surface of the planet. Their ships, still formidable despite the losses in space, unleashed wave after wave of assault forces. Armored tanks and foot soldiers stormed the surface, their advanced weapons blasting craters into the once serene landscape. They targeted the Elyon underground shelters, where the civilian population had sought refuge. The Elyons had no military force, no defenses. They had lived in peace for centuries, and now they were helpless against the invaders. The Elyons watched in horror from the safety of their underground bunkers as explosions erupted above ground. The walls shook with each blast, and the sound of destruction reverberated through the tunnels. Ava Lennox, who had once written about the peaceful lives of her people, now found herself in the middle of a nightmare. There was nothing they could do, nothing but wait for the end. Their only hope, it seemed, was the fleet above. And even that hope was fading as the Tornax forces pushed forward with unrelenting force. But just when the situation seemed darkest, a new force arrived. The Elyons had no way of knowing it. But Earth's forces were not confined to the skies above Elia 7. A series of transport ships descended from the heavens, their sleek designs cutting through the atmosphere with impressive speed. The ships landed with military precision, their engines kicking up dust and debris as the hatches opened. Out stepped Earth's finest, the elite soldiers, led by Captain Ray O'Hara, a combat specialist renowned for his tactical genius and unyielding bravery. The Elyons watched in disbelief as the Earth soldiers swiftly organized themselves, setting up defensive perimeters and deploying high-tech weaponry. For the first time in what felt like forever, the Elyons saw an organized defense against the Tornax invasion. Captain O'Hara, with his sharp blue eyes and stern demeanor, barked orders to his team, and they wasted no time in executing his commands. The soldiers moved with efficiency and skill, using advanced laser rifles, plasma grenades, and electromagnetic shields to push back the Tornax soldiers. The Tornax, taken by surprise, were forced to regroup. They had never expected the Elyons to be aided by an advanced fighting force, let alone one from Earth. The ground battle was fierce. Tornax forces, armed with devastating alien weapons, clashed with Earth's high-tech soldiers in a deadly exchange of firepower. But Earth soldiers were not only fighting to defend Elia 7, they were fighting for something more. This was no ordinary conflict. It was a battle that transcended mere survival. As the Tornax soldiers began to falter, the Elyons, still hiding in their shelters, began to feel the smallest flicker of hope. Ava, who had spent days in despair, found herself staring at the screens, watching as the tide of battle shifted. The Earth soldiers were doing the impossible. They were fighting back. Ava could hardly believe it. She had spent her life recording her people's history, studying their culture and their way of life. But now she was witnessing a new chapter being written, one that would forever change the course of history. The Elyons had always seen themselves as peaceful bystanders in the grand scheme of the galaxy. They had no military, no weapons, no power to resist invaders. But Earth soldiers, who had come to their aid, were showing them that they didn't have to be alone in this fight. The humans were teaching them that survival wasn't just about hiding, it was about fighting, standing up, and resisting the darkness. The battle on the surface intensified as more Tornax forces descended, but Earth soldiers were relentless. Captain O'Hara moved through the chaos, directing his squadron with a calm focus that inspired everyone around him. His team was unstoppable, cutting through the Tornax forces with precision strikes and tactical brilliance. The alien invaders, though many in number, were not prepared for the human soldiers' skill and resolve. As the battle raged, Ava and her fellow aliens began to realize that this was their chance to fight back. Earth soldiers weren't just defending, they were teaching them how to defend themselves. Ava, always a student of history, now found herself in the position of learning firsthand the strategies and techniques that could save her people. The Earth soldiers, with their advanced weaponry and expertise, handed out training to the aliens, teaching them how to use the weapons recovered from the battlefield. The aliens, initially hesitant and unsure, quickly adapted, learning the basics of combat in a matter of hours. For the first time, they were fighting for their survival not as helpless victims, but as active participants in their own defense. As the war raged on, Ava found herself standing side by side with the human soldiers, holding a plasma rifle in her hands, the weight of it strange but reassuring. The Tornax forces, once so confident in their dominance, were now being pushed back on all fronts. The aliens, with the training they had received, fought alongside the humans with determination and unity. It was no longer just a battle for the survival of one planet, it had become a symbol of cooperation between two species who had once been strangers. Ava could hardly believe how far they had come in such a short time. The fight for Elia 7 had become a fight for hope, for survival, and for a future where the galaxy could unite against oppression. With each passing hour, the tide turned further in favor of Earth and the aliens. The Tornax forces, demoralized by their sudden losses, began to retreat, their once unstoppable advance slowed by the combined might of two worlds. Captain O'Hara's voice crackled over the comms as he ordered his team to press on. "Keep pushing, soldiers. The planet's ours to save. We're not stopping until every last one of these invaders is driven off Elia 7. Ava, standing alongside the Earth soldiers, felt the weight of the moment. She had been a historian, a recorder of her people's past. But now she was part of something far greater, something that would shape the future of the galaxy. She knew, in the deepest part of her heart, that this moment would go down in history as the day the aliens and humans united to overcome a threat that could have destroyed them both. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, Ava allowed herself to believe. They could win. Together, they could win. The sky above Elia 7, once darkened by the terrifying presence of the Tornax fleet, now shimmered with the brilliant light of Earth's armada. The battle was all but won. Earth's ships, powerful and relentless, had systematically dismantled the remaining Tornax warships in orbit, picking them off one by one with deadly precision. The Tornax Dominion, once a force that had terrorized countless star systems, was on the brink of collapse. The alien invaders, despite their strength and military might, had been outmatched by the technological superiority and strategic brilliance of Earth's forces. On the ground, the Tornax soldiers, who had wreaked havoc across the surface of Elia 7, found themselves in retreat, driven back by Earth's elite forces, and the newly armed alien fighters who had joined the fray. The aliens, who had once cowered in fear, now stood proudly beside their human allies, their weapons in hand, determined to see the invaders vanquished. The battle for the planet had become a symbol of unity, a testament to the strength that could be found when different species came together in the face of tyranny. The last pockets of resistance from the Tornax forces were quickly crushed, and the surface of Elia 7 began to calm, its skies free from the fire of war. Meanwhile, in space, Grand General Zorak, the leader of the Tornax Dominion, was seething with fury. His fleet, once vast and formidable, was now in disarray, shattered by the might of Earth's armada. His once proud warships, now burning wrecks, drifted aimlessly through the void. His confidence had been shattered. How could this have happened? He had underestimated the human race, underestimated their power, their resolve, and their sheer determination. Zorak had ordered his fleet to fall back, to regroup and fight another day, but it was already too late. Earth's Armada had anticipated his every move, tracking his fleet with an efficiency that left him powerless. One by one, his ships were picked off, torn apart by the advanced weaponry of the human fleet. He could do nothing but watch in helpless rage as his empire crumbled. Then the inevitable happened. Zorak's flagship, the last remaining ship of the Tornex fleet, was surrounded. The mighty vessel was no match for the Earth ships closing in on it from all directions. With nowhere to run, Zorak's pride had been shattered beyond repair. In a desperate attempt to avoid complete annihilation, he attempted to initiate a final stand, but Earth's forces were unrelenting. The flagship was disabled, and Zorak himself was captured. Taken aboard an Earth vessel. As the Grand General was brought before Admiral Seraphine Calloway, the leader of Earth's Armada. The atmosphere was tense. Zorak, a towering figure of fury and arrogance, glared at the human commander. His mind raced, considering his options. Surrender? To what? To humiliation? To the consequences of his empire's unprovoked tyranny? Or would he fight to the last, to preserve the pride of his people, even if it meant facing certain death? Admiral Calloway, standing tall and composed, studied him for a moment before speaking. "You have two choices, General," she said coldly, her voice unwavering. "You can surrender and face the consequences of your people's actions, your tyranny, your conquest, your slaughter. Or you can continue to fight, to die with what's left of your fleet." Her words hung in the air, as if daring him to choose. Zorak, humiliated and defeated, could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. He had led his people to conquer worlds, to destroy those who dared oppose them, but now he was nothing more than a prisoner. He had no choice but to surrender. With a snarl of frustration, Zorak dropped his weapon. "I surrender," he spat, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "But know this, the Tornex dominion will rise again. You cannot crush us forever." Admiral Calloway's gaze remained cold as she nodded. "You're free to believe that, General. But it won't matter. The Tornex Empire is finished. Your people's reign of terror is over." With Zorak's surrender, the last vestiges of the Tornex dominion collapsed. Earth's Armada swiftly swept through the remnants of the Tornex fleet, ensuring no survivors remained to threaten the galaxy. The victory was decisive, and the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. For Elia 7, for countless other worlds that had lived under the shadow of the Tornax, the terror was finally over. Back on the surface of Elia 7, the Elians, now free from their oppressors, looked up to the skies with gratitude and awe. They had witnessed firsthand the might of Earth's Armada, and they knew they owed their survival to the humans who had come to their rescue. Ava Lennox, standing among her people, felt a deep sense of relief. The struggle had been fierce, but her people had endured. They had fought side by side with the humans, and together they had triumphed. In the quiet moments following the battle, Ava returned to her study, her pen hovering over the pages of her history book. She had witnessed a turning point in galactic history, one that would be remembered for generations to come. With a deep breath, she began to write the final entry of her book, her words flowing across the pages like a river of hope. "This day," she wrote, "marked the end of the Tornex Dominion and the beginning of a new era. An era where no species would stand alone, and no tyrant would go unchallenged. The humans of Earth, our saviors, taught us the true meaning of courage, unity, and the will to survive. And though the battle is over, the fight for freedom will never end." As Earth's Armada prepared to depart, leaving behind peacekeepers to ensure the galaxy remained free, Ava stepped outside. The stars above seemed brighter now, as if they, too, had been touched by the light of the human victory. She looked up at the vast expanse of space, knowing that her people, once helpless, would never forget the day Earth arrived. And she knew that the galaxy would never forget the power of humanity's might. The tide had turned, and the darkness that had once threatened to swallow the galaxy had been driven back. The universe, it seemed, was finally free.